What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Ones Ready podcast. I don't want to overtalk this intro. It's taken me 10 takes so far to get it right. It's just because I care, and you're going to see why. The Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, or SEAC, is the highest ranking senior non-commissioned officer position inside of the DoD. There has never been an airman to hold that position until December of 2019, when Pararescue Chief Master Sergeant Ramon Colon-Lopez took on the title of SEAC. CZ, as he's better known inside of the Pararescue and the joint community, has a lifetime of leadership lessons, silver bullets for leadership, and his overall approach to being a carnivore leader. And through these past 4 years, he has led and given counsel to the Joint Chiefs through some of the most tumultuous times that we've seen inside of this country. I do want to apologize for a little bit of the audio on this one. We had a bit of a connection issue with CZ, so hopefully that doesn't annoy you too much. He dropped some truth bombs on this one, and as always, gave plenty of mentorship to myself and Chief Peaches. So, quick shout out. Thank you, SEAC, CZ. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate you always pouring into this community and the larger DoD enterprise. We hope you enjoy this episode of the Ones Ready podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Ones Ready podcast. You're in the team room. Right now, you have me, and we have SEAC. So, SEAC, I got to be honest. I'm not going to fanboy on you because that would just be weird. But SEAC, CZ, you're a legend. Really appreciate you joining us. Maybe Aaron will hop on after and jump into the mix with us. But for right now, everyone is stuck with the two of us. So I really appreciate you joining.
Thanks, guys. And I know that this has been a long time in the making. I'm glad that we're finally getting together. And it was good to see Aaron while we had the other difficulties, technical difficulties. Hopefully he'll be able to jump in and we'll go with it.
Yeah. So, SEAC, you have a long and colorful career in Pararescue. You mind hopping in that and kind of giving a kind of background, as in like what drove you to Pararescue? Did you always want to be a pararescueman, or did you kind of find it along the way?
Well, Peaches, I didn't really know much about Pararescue when I first enlisted in the Air Force. And it was by chance that I stumbled on the opportunity to join the ranks. But I think that the origin of my motivation to be in the front lines was during my first deployment, which was during the first Gulf War to Escan village in Saudi Arabia. So being in the rear doing logistical work didn't really scratch my itch. So I believe that it was at that time that I realized that if I wanted to be forward and act like a military combatant, I needed to do something different. And by chance, I met this guy, Senior Master Sergeant Gary Lurie, that offered me the opportunity to be able to come into Pararescue, and I didn't know much about it. So he basically gave me a quick rundown, told me about how cool it was, but he didn't tell me about the pain that I was about to endure by going to the OLH, or the selection course, which I went in there cold turkey. I had my issues, got my setbacks, but there was the mentality of never quit. And in all honesty, it was when I graduated the Pararescue pipeline that I felt and discovered my purpose in life. And the rest is history, man.
It's tough to put your finger on, right? And we've talked about it kind of before, like what that calls to you, because our demographic is usually around 15 to 35-year-olds, which is kind of a big swath, but it's all folks that are interested in being combat controllers, pararescuemen, special reconnaissance and TACPs. And then we get some other folks that are interested in being rangers, stuff like that. But you have folks that are trying to figure out, hey, do I go be a Green Beret or a Navy SEAL, or do I go be a pararescueman? And it's one of those things. It's like there has to be something about that job or that mission set that kind of calls to you. For some people, I'm sure it's medicine. For some people, it's someone like you and Aaron, that you are there at somebody's worst day in their life, and you're there to pick them up and save them and bring them back home to repatriate them?
Well, I think, Pararescue was appealing to me because I had aspirations always in being an but I didn't like school. So I don't think that was going to be part of the plan, right? Especially going to med school and residency and everything else. But I think that when the opportunity came, it was just a natural connection and interest to be able to do that. And then the whole rescue piece of it, that was very appealing to me. So I think that it was a natural name.
I'd say so. You did a lot of good work. So, I mean, I'll take it. Like I said, you've had a very colorful career, and by colorful, I mean in a good way. Like you put in a lot of work, especially in the early days as a pararescueman. So, thanks for that. Because it helped guide folks like me. I know I'm a combat controller, but when I went through in '99, I still went to the OLH. What was the old school NDOC. So I was, brought up by CCT and PJ, so it was great.
Right.
So
That's right.
yeah, so as we're kind of talking about our demographic of 15 to 35-year-olds that want to be pararescue and combat controllers and stuff like that, it is tough to ignore the retention and recruiting issues that are going on, and it's not just Air Force or Marines or anybody like that, but it is DoD wide. What are some of the initiatives that you want to push forward, or what is kind of your opinion on what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong in terms of recruitment and retention? And believe me, SEAC, I don't want to paint you in a corner and say, hey, we're doing things right or wrong, but like we can always improve. So what are some of the ways we can do to improve?
You're 100% right. I mean, if you're not improving, you're actually getting something no. But recruitment and retention are two separate issues. So let me hit recruitment first, and then I'll go into the retention piece. So historically, we see dips in recruiting after any major conflict. Part of it is because society's tired, because society is unaware, and because society devalues the purpose of the warfighter. And we have seen it after World War II, the Great Depression. Then we went into the Korean War, which we had similar issues to what we're having today. And that was basically people lacking the abilities or the aptitude to be able to serve. After Vietnam, we got to see that dip. And now, after 20 years of war in the Middle East, we're seeing that dip once again. So there's a factor right there. One thing that is really hindering our recruitment efforts, because recruitment is not necessarily an issue of the Department of Defense. It is more a society issue, and that is that propensity to serve. And if you look at the way that the Department of Defense is currently being depicted, as rogue, as soft, as disastrous, that is what 99% of Americans that have no clue what the department does believes. So if you have a daughter, you don't want it to come in because you don't want it to become the next rape. If you have a son, you don't want it to come in because this department is all about everything but war fighting. And I don't want him to shower with a transgender person. You don't want people to actually join because if you go there, you're going to come out broken. With PTSD, with all kinds of issues. And that is really the drum that has been beat over the past 15 years. And that's not necessarily true because not too many people, including some of our people in industry and the VSO, the Veterans Organizations, they're not talking about the great things that they get out of it. And if you were to speak to the Department of Labor about the caliber of people that you get in industry after they depart service, they will sing praise about the diligence, the loyalty, the deliberate approach that they take to any task that is given to them. Very few people are talking about the great experience that people get from serving in the military. After 33 years, I have been to 82 countries and engaged with people from those countries. Talk about a global exposure, exposed to so many cultures. to have a vast knowledge on how humans interact in different societies, and then bringing that into industry after I depart, I'm pretty sure it's going to fare really well. But not enough people are talking about the great things. Our own communities, when we're talking about PJs, CCT, special reconnaissance, we need to talk more about those times where our mettle was put to the test and how young men ended up rising to that occasion and created a brotherhood that nobody's going to break forever, no matter how hard they try. But those are the stories that we need to move forward so that people understand that this is a generational commitment to national security. That even though we're not in conflict right now, at this very moment, now is the time to train and to get it right, to make sure that we do not fail the American people when the flag goes up, because it is a matter of when, not if, when that flag goes up. And I will tell you and guarantee you that the next fight is like something we have never seen. So we need American sons and daughters to rise up to the occasion. That is the recruitment. The retention side is all about purpose. So right now, specific to our communities, a lot of the people coming in are like, well, we're no longer kicking indoors. We're no longer going to specific areas of responsibilities to go ahead and put ourselves to the test. Well, that was the same position that I was in when I came into Pararescue. I lived through my formative years waiting for that big mission. And then the mission will come and it was a draw of the lot. Whoever was on alert will get it. And then everybody else was in the periphery admiring the actions of the people that got that opportunity. And then September 11th happened, and then it was a free for all. Everybody had that opportunity. But eventually, we're going to get back to that time, to where the people that are actually coming in the fight and actually are taking the time to train and think differently about the way that we execute the mission, that is going to lead us to victory here in the near future. And that is why we need to go ahead and emphasize retention and the importance. Hey, just because the music is not playing, eventually you will get your opportunity to dance.
No, that's a solid answer, SEAC, and like I agree. Something that I'm at the weapons school now, which all of our listeners already know because I always talk about it because I love the job so much. But we have a new commandant now, and one of the things that we have noticed, not just kind of in the enlisted structure, but also we've got a lot of pilot retention issues and stuff like that. So it's kind of trying to get after that. How do I retain you? I'm retaining you. I can only offer you so much. I can offer you a little bit more money. Maybe there's some bonuses. Maybe there's some assignments I can try and offer you. But really, I'm offering you the chance to serve your country nobly. Is what I'm doing, and it's really the only thing I have to genuinely offer somebody.
Well, I was recently having another conversation with the Air and Space Forces Association, and they brought up the fact that a lot of industries providing pretty competitive and comparable packages to what the military gets. But when you start comparing those packages side by side, it's apples and cantaloupes. It's not the same. It's not the same quality, and the most important thing is that you will not get that sense of purpose. And I actually met Chief comment about, what do you want to do when you're 55 and you're bouncing your grandchild on your knee? You want to talk about that great latte that you made at Starbucks, or you want to talk about serving your country? What stories do you want your family to remember about you? And that is really the purpose. I mean, the purpose is really why we do the things that we do. And it is something that 99% of our society is not even willing to. Some 75%, 78% can't even do it. So we should take a lot more pride in service and actually continue to produce warfighting machine that every generation has the duty to go ahead and fill those ranks.
And that's great input, SEAC. I apologize for my earlier comm issues. I also knocked out a set because I know that that's the standard. So I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good in front of the camera. So, retention and recruitment obviously are foremost on our mind. What would you say to those young airmen, those young soldiers, those young sailors, those young Marines, those young guardians what would you say to help guide them through that early part? Because your period as the SEAC here from 2019 until now, like it has been a tough time in America and in the service to really focus and keep our laser focus on what's important, which is that service, which is the United States of America, to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic, as we all said. What would you say to those young folks to really focus on, to really boil it down? We talk about finding your why a lot. What would you say to those young airmen, guardians, Marines, soldiers, sailors, to keep them focused on the task at hand?
Well, the task at hand is a critical task. And I already mentioned that it's a task that, number one, few people want to do. Number two, few people can do that. And we know that by sheer numbers, specifically the healthy state of affairs with our youth is not really where we want to be. But that is nothing new. We have been there before. But the message that we need to pass on to every single one of them is that they have the mission. And the reason they grew up free is because the people that came before them decided to sacrifice some part of their life, some part of their liberty, to ensure that we'll continue the American dream. And that particular sentence that says, in order to create more perfect you. You cannot have democracy, you cannot have freedom without defense. It is that simple, because it is a mighty power of any nation that wants to make sure that they don't have encroachment from other people trying to impose their way of life into us. And America has been the beacon of freedom for decades, centuries. And our partners know it. And we need to make sure that our youth, specifically the people that are filling the ranks right now, that they do not take that for granted. That is the worst thing that they can do. Oh, I am of no use because we're not in combat. Well, if you leave, what happens when combat comes? Do you think a fresh person off the street is going to be able to do what you do? No, you will get your time to shine. All you have to do is stick it out and do what you decided to do. Under that oath that says that you state your name to solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the officers appointed over me in accordance with regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God, or whatever you choose to believe in, right? That is the beauty of what we do. Nobody else takes that oath. And if you're in the door, appreciate and respect that oath. And if you're thinking about coming in, that is the honor that you will have to be part of the few that is willing to sacrifice it all for the better of society.
Amen, SEAC. We could just close it down right there. That was it. That was the mic drop moment for the entire talk. What are some things that are keeping you up at night when we talk about the next fight? So we have to be ready to go, and we constantly have to be looking at the next 10 years war and not the last 10 years war. When we look at what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, and when we look to the Indo-Pacific theater and we sort of start laying out where are we going next, that's a lot of questions. And you already alluded to it a little bit earlier, where people do have questions of, well, if I'm not kicking in a door right now, or, we talk about getting ready for the next fight, what keeps you up at night for where we're going as a military force and in the world?
Well, so nothing really keeps me up at night, but I do think a lot. I have to recharge my batteries to be able to think some more the following day. But this is a concern that I have. Right now, the greatest advantage that we have, and every single officer here in SES and Pentagon will say that it's our enlisted force, right? Because that is something that no other nation has been able to replicate. No other nation, including our top two enemies. You see the Russians right now getting their assets handed to them. Why? Because the Ukrainians decided to create a force that was similar to the NATO construct, specifically the United States, with the help of the California National Guard. That is the fight that is being brought to one of our top enemies right now by a light force. Imagine how that will fare if it was the U.S. forces getting after them. They fear that. They fear that because they don't trust the fact that 80% of the force is of this enlisted grade and that they're empowered to be autonomous in the battle. The Chinese are paying close attention to that, and they're trying to replicate it. So the only way that they will match it is with experience. Volume is not going to do it. We have been there before. New equipment may be able to compete, but eventually, if you don't have the human weapon system behind the rivet and steel, eventually you're going to come up short. And it is that fighting spirit that really gives us the fighting edge. One concern that I have right now is that I think that there's a lot of people in the services, because we're not in combat now, that they're thinking that they can change policy via petition. And meaning that they want to go ahead and do whatever they think is good for their individuality, in order to go ahead and make themselves self-important. When I was growing up in Pararescue, I remember talking to the generation before. And if you remember, those were the Vietnam guys, the POWs, the Silver Star recipients, Air Force Plus recipients. And in those conversations, as a young Pararescue man, I spoke to POWs. Tell me what it was like being in captivity. I've been to the training, but I know that that doesn't compare. So tell me, give me the raw details on what you did to go ahead and maintain your faith in nation, in God, and in your fellow prisoners. Then I went to those Silver Star recipients. Tell me what it was like to be the troops in contact. What actually kept you focused? What were the complacent moments when you almost didn't come back? And what is it that you will pass on to us when the next fight comes? And then I started talking to the leaders that were there at the time. What tough decisions do you have to make to you kept the forces engaged in that very, very contentious time? Man, I wasn't talking about uniforms. I wasn't talking about the standards. I wasn't talking about anything that was not combat related. And the reason for that was because I knew at some point I will have to do those things. So I want people to really pay close attention to the standards and why we have them. And I will tell every single person across the services that if somebody's basically holding you accountable for your standards, accountability is not hostility. Accountability is simply a check from someone that cares to make sure that you can survive on the battlefield. It is that simple. All we're asking you is to abide by the standards, do what you're supposed to be doing, and eventually carry your weight when the fight comes, when it comes to your MOS, rate, or AFSC. That's all. It's pretty simple. And we do that because we know that complexity is going to come, that the battle's not going to be streamlined, the battle may not be linear, and we need thinking bodies out there to be able to go ahead and make decisions at a moment's notice. But you cannot do that without basic discipline and adherence to standards.
Yeah, and in order to be ready and prepped for the next fight, whatever that is and whenever that may come, we know that we have to continue to professionalize the force. And I know you brought up the enlisted side, so we'll stick on that. And we've got to keep professionalizing the enlisted structure. And like, in your opinion, are we doing that by? And this is also my opinion. I think we've got to hold up standards. We have to make people accountable and keep people accountable to their actions, ensuring they're hitting the standards. Is that, in your opinion, is that the best way that we can ensure that we are professionalizing the force?
That is one way, Pinchos, and it is the critical way, because without that basic foundation, nothing else will follow. You start with that foundation, and then you start opening doors for further education and training. Without education and training, you cannot get people to think about how to evolve, because they're not thinking about the potential of what is it that I'm not staring at that can come and bite me in the ass. So you train them and you educate them, and then you provide them a platform, an opportunity to go ahead and test those skills and make sure that they're able to validate their capabilities, identify the gaps or the blind spots, and then come back to the table and provide proper solutions for any possible scenario. That is nothing new. That is the way that we have always operated. So we cannot lose sight of that.
No, and I'm glad you said, you know, educate people, train people, and allow them to validate it, because I think, in my opinion, I think in some areas of training we have become risk adverse. We don't want to take risks here and there, because we're scared that something might happen. You know, an incident might happen, and in my opinion, I think we need to push the limits now in a training environment, in a garrison environment, so that I know where the limit is. I know what the no kidding capabilities are, so that when I do have to do this in combat and I do have to do it real world, that I know where my limitations are. I know what works and what doesn't work, and then I can get after it. And with that said, like, of course, we have to mitigate risk where we can and where we should. We shouldn't take unnecessary risk, but we also have to understand that no amount of operational risk management, no amount of checklists are going to prevent every single thing from, or every little thing that could happen. Because the three of us on here know, as well as everybody else listening, Murphy's Law will always come in and find something to mess it up, something to go wrong. Anyway, that's my humble 2 cents.
Yeah, well, risk is a necessity of excellence. Without risk, you can't validate anything. And if you think it's going to work, or if you take it easy on certain tasks just to check a box, you're going to be in the losing end of the equation. You really have to put yourself what we call gut checks, in order to say, maybe we need to go ahead and train a little bit harder on this. Maybe we need to reconfigure equipment. Maybe we need to go ahead and do something different. Maybe we just don't need to do this at all because it's stupid. But risk is that necessity to continue to push the envelope to make sure that we have an unmatched capability.
Absolutely. And you need those gut check moments. We all look back at INDOC or assessment selection. We have those callback moments that go, hey, wait a second, I have done something hard. So this task that's in front of me, it may seem impossible right now, but I was taught how to get through that event. And then I had a good debrief afterwards. And the debriefs aren't always nice, but they're almost always valuable for what it is that you need to hear to be better. So accepting that risk and not taking unnecessary risk, of course, is something that we're going to need to do. Speaking a little bit on your leadership style, SEAC, CZ, everybody knows you as a straight shooter, even when it's uncomfortable. And that people see that transparency and the way that you lead, and they really connect to it. So just recently, you had an opinion on the NDAA and some of these congressional holdings that we had, and you spoke truth to power. And I thought that was really important to talk about here, because one of the things that folks, when they have a misconception about the Air Force, the DoD writ large, is they say, well, you have to fall in line and everybody has the same opinion. You, SEAC, don't have the same opinion as some of your senior leaders. And I think that that's beneficial. And I just wanted to open the floor for you to really talk about being able to be transparent, to speak truth to power, and being able to have your own opinion as long as it's professional and tactful and put forward in the correct way.
Well, so I don't think opinion will be the right word to use, Aaron. I will say advice. Because anybody can have an opinion, right? And sometimes when you have an opinion, it's biased in nature based on what your position is on any particular subject. When I talk about advice, it's got to be calculated, it's got to be factual, and it's got to be well studied. So every comment that I make, I look at the facts behind the situation. I look at the environment that the decision was made in. And I just call it like I see it. It's that simple. I was not brought here to the Pentagon to be a yes man. And I've never been, and I will never become. And often I have to be behind closed doors with senior people speaking that truth to power and bringing forward the concerns that you, the force, has. Because that is really what I do. I'm a sensor, a synchronizer, and an integrator for the total force. And my voice is your voice coming from the trenches. So if I get the spidey sense that something is not going to resonate with the force, that's the first thing that I say. Then, after I say it, I go ahead and get into the details, the facts, even the feedback from the force. And then I come back with a rational argument on why I made my assumption in the first place. But that calculated approach really is necessary because we live in an environment that everything gets spun in whatever direction you want it to look like. And I mentioned here recently that misinformation is a hypersonic weapon of mass disruption, and people are using it to their advantage and our disadvantage when it comes to splitting us apart on any particular issue. So when, like the recent example that you brought about, the holdings on the general officers, a lot of people are under the assumption that, well, they'll find some acting or, somebody else will fill the shoes. It's not as easy as that. Take the Marine Corps Commandant as an example. Vacant. So the Vice Commandant has to fill that role, General Smith. But he's also the Vice Commandant because he hasn't been confirmed to take over as the Commandant of the Marine Corps. And the Vice Commandant hasn't been confirmed to fill the shoes. So now we have one general officer filling 2 slots designed for 4-star generals. And what do you think is going to happen in that decision space? Do you think it's going to be as effective when he's not fully focused on the duties of the one billet that he's supposed to be doing, and he's got to do the job of 2 people? Put that on any junior NCO right now to do the job of 2 people and see what happens to the productivity, the quality, and the effectiveness of the task that we're asking them to do. It is irrational. So that is why we need to have the right leaders in the right place to make sure that they provide the top cover for the organization that they're responsible for, and also to provide the proper advice to the leaders above to be able to make sure that we have the most rational course of action for any contingency that we're about to face.
And I can only imagine the stress that you take on in trying to coherently explain these issues to people, because it's high level problem solving, really, with the most dire consequences that one could imagine. And I know it has to feel like sometimes the very country could be at risk. I can only assume how stressful those conversations must be, and how high level problem solving has really helped you, being a pararescueman your entire career. Like we're known in the Air Force Special Warfare community, all 4 of the career fields, as high level problem solvers. What are some of those problems that you have, big rocks, that you would like to get done before your term as SEAC is over? Or what are some things that you really wish, those problems that you really wish, king for a day, you could just make go away right now? Do you have anything on your mind that you're just really trying to get done before you leave the office?
If I were king for a day, I would just like for America to get it together and unite, and then for our young men and women to finally say, you know what? Service is worthy of my time or my life. That would be one thing. Throughout my tenure as the SEAC, we ended up taking specific tasks year by year to make sure that we not only put proposals on the table, but that we have solutions to be able to show the force that we worked hard to get this done. Some of that stuff, clearly being only SEAC number 4, I had to work quite hard to make sure that people understood exactly what the roles and responsibilities of the SEAC were, which meetings I needed to be a part of, and what value I brought to the Department of Defense. Right now, we're in a very good footing on that. So when Troy Black takes over for me, it's going to have a very well-laid foundation for the value and the purpose of the student. And by the way, for those of the audience, of our audience that do not understand the difference between the SEAC and a service senior enlisted advisor, is the Title 10 responsibilities that the services have, manning, training, and equipping, is not a role of the SEAC. The SEAC is the principal advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Joint Chief of Staff, the Secretary of Defense, and at times the President on issues that pertain to the total force. Whether it's healthcare, whether it's pay and compensation, things of that nature, the SEAC is at the forefront representing the total force in that. One example of that is the quadrennial review for military compensation, which is taking place right now. The SEAC is the sole enlisted member that attends that meeting to make decisions on what your pay and compensation is going to look like. The services provide ample input, but the SEAC carries the mail. And the last one is the decisions that get made at the infamous 10, where the Joint Chiefs and the chairman, and at times the Secretary of Defense, get together. The only enlisted person invited to those meetings is the SEAC. And that is with the expectation that I will carry the mail for the 2.4 million service members that are serving today. So that is the difference. So when it comes to those particular actions, I believe that during my tenure, we got well established and we opened many doors for the SEAC to be included in those meetings to make sure that we continuously brought over the voice of the enlisted force before key decisions were made or policies were implemented. The other thing that we did is highlight the importance of enlisted joint education, which we created a brand new course called Gateway for E7s, and we'll revamp the entire way that we do Keystone, which is a pinnacle course for senior enlisted leaders to make sure that they understood the strategic picture before they took on joint assignments. Then we ended up strengthening relationships with a lot of our overseas partners, specifically our Five Eye partners, because we know that the fight of tomorrow is going to require collaboration amongst nations. It's not going to be an unilateral fight. So we need to do better on building those relationships over time. It's just not just relationships. We're talking friendships. We're talking just like the three of us communicate. That is the level of focus that I put into building relationships with our international partners. And then obviously taking care of our people and families. If we're not packing the mail, it's sent to Congress, to the Department of Defense, to make sure that we do everything possible to take care of our people and families so that the war can be focused on war fighting, we failed. And we did a pretty good job of taking care of those things. Now, my successor is going to have a lot of that collateral stuff that still lingers for years after to make sure that we maintain a consistent drumbeat when it comes to helping our people. But it's going to be under SEAC number 5, SEAC Troy Black, that this pay and compensation piece is going to take place. So I'll be paying close attention to how we do that. And I'm also going to be in the periphery providing input based on the knowledge and the work that I will as this year.
No, that's good, SEAC. And I guess kind of a follow-on to Aaron's question is, because that's obviously a lot that you work on and have worked on, since 2019. But what are, like, if you could pick 2 or 3 of the big things that you're most proud of that you were able to accomplish while you were in the seat, and I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot because I didn't preempt those questions. Like, no, I didn't give you a heads up. Like, hey,
no worry.
Yeah, start thinking about this so you get your prep. But like, what are some of the things that you're just super proud of that you're like, man, I can't believe I got a chance to have a part of this and really kind of make this thing successful?
I'll tell you that in the forefront is my engagement with 3 secretaries of defense that I have had the honor to serve with. And the way that all 3 of those gentlemen, we're talking Secretary Edward, then Acting Secretary Miller, and now Secretary Austin, the way that they listen when we speak, it is something refreshing. They really take our input and they really take action on what we're trying. The ability and the honor to be able to do that, it is something that any senior enlisted leader should strive to become, because you're really, really doing everything in your power to take care of the force. Something else that I'm hoping people remember is that from the time that I put Aaron Love through the PJ school and everything else, I always took pride of leading by example. I didn't ask him to do anything that I wasn't even willing to do or that I wasn't willing to demonstrate. And when General Milley selected me as a SEAC, he ended up communicating with a lot of my foremen commanders. And that is something that was very consistent across the board, that this is what you get when you work with CJCS. And it's become part of my character. It's become part of my legacy that, hey, if you're going to lead, you better lead from the front. And it's not about lip service, it's about actions. And then it's about following to make sure that you promise on everything that you promise. Will that fail sometimes? Absolutely, especially with the volume of taking care of 2.4 million people. But the score sheet at the end of the day, it's got to be on the positive end, on the actions that you took to take care of people, and not so much on the things that you did to help yourself.
Well, I will tell you, SEAC, that I distinctly remember, since you opened the door to talk about my pipeline career and doing things that you would not ask anybody else to do. I distinctly remember, as the commandant of the Pararescue and Combat Rescue Officer Apprentice Course School, you had a lesson for my team to learn, and that lesson involved digging 3 graves in order to make a point. I also remember that this happened on a Monday, and that it was Blues Monday in the Air Force at that point. And you, in your blues, came out and you did your fair share of digging in the blues. So for everybody that's out there, I can 100% attest to that. And I can also attest to us deserving that lesson, because we were the worst apprentice course team, I think, maybe in history. SEAC, as you get to the end,
whoa. Before you move on for that.
No. We're gonna
move on from that. You were not the worst. You were not the worst apprentice team. You guys had a lot of potential, but you also were not really looking out for each other the way that I expected you to do, based on my experiences in combat before I came to the People's School. So the reason we dug the graves is because we had a couple of people that were left downtown. They got into an alcohol-related incident, and I'm not sure if it was a DUI or not. But the lesson in digging those graves was that, hey, if we talk about not leaving anyone behind, that others may live and everything else, we got to take care of one another, because if we don't do it, nobody else will. And it starts right here with the team. We look out for each other. We don't act selfish, and we actually do everything necessary to be able to make sure that we bring back everybody alive. And the reason I got in there is because when I felt it because it was my responsibility. The fact that you guys didn't abide by the rules, because I was the acting commandant at the time. That's why I got my ass in that hole, and regardless of uniform, because it's not about the looks, it's about, man, the action. I got in there, started digging with you guys because I cared about it.
And we all felt that immensely. We took a lot. It's one of the, I can remember that day crystal clear. Every single thing that happened during that day, and those lessons that we learned that day have stuck with me for my entire career. So for you, SEAC, as your career is getting closer to the end, I know that you don't feel like you're not done, and you're definitely not one of the types of people that's going to rest on your laurels or coast to the end. But as you start looking at your next move and you start looking at what's next for you, what do you think is on your horizon?
Well, I'll tell you, Aaron, that being the SEAC is a lifelong commitment, just like being the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force is a lifelong commitment. And when you love service and when you are loyal to something that you know is part of your DNA, that it is part of your purpose in life, and it is the one thing that gave you all the opportunities for you to become successful at it, you cannot turn you cannot turn away from it. So regardless of where I'm at any given time, I'm always going to give back to the community meaning the military community. I'm always going to advocate for making sure that our troops have everything they need, specifically when we look at high-end fighting. And I'm also going to look to make sure that we maintain the sanctity of the purpose, and our number one focus is warfighting. So that is what I'm finding.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I can't speak to someone, being SEAC or even, Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, but I can imagine that it is a a lifelong lifelong service, really, to all those airmen, sailors, Marine sailor. I'm a guardians. I'm gonna lose some of them, but it's. I think it goes back to that service that we talked about, and you're never really done, and you feel. I don't know about you, SEAC, but like I feel like I can never. I'm never living up to what I should be. I can never do enough. I feel like I fall short of that quite often. So maybe that's just my own, insecurities in that side. But I can tell you that we don't think that from your end. We see you out there doing things all the time. I mean, I think it's amazing that you even remember Aaron's class and the grave digging. I mean, that's incredible to me because I can't remember half the stuff that happened to me at NDOC. So,
Well, it's easy to remember when it's not a shtick. If you really care about something, it's a memory that stays alive in your head. But also it was during that time that I was having my deepest struggles mentally, and these guys didn't know anything about it. So everything got magnified and intensified because of the struggles that I was having myself. But when it comes to you and what you said, Peaches, I mean, you're always going to be a comeback informer. We're always cognizant that we have a lot of people that have done far more than we have. And I'm a mediocre TJ at best. All right. That's the way that I consider myself. But that is not weakness or insecurity. That is just the humility within us. That we know that we're in the company of some magnificent people that are willing to go beyond what most people will imagine is possible. And we always keep that in mind because that is just what brothers are. And man, you cannot be boastful or cocky when you have that kind of company.
yeah, no, I'm with you. So carrying that kind of humility on to folks that want to join the service, like as a whole, what kind of advice would you give to those folks that are either in high school about to graduate, they have 8 months until they graduate, or those folks that are at the academies or at colleges doing ROTC that want to join and do the officer ranks? Just kind of what would you want to impart on them?
Well, we always took pride in the Tier 1 community, calling ourselves quiet professionals, right? And we never bragged about our deeds. We never really talked about much of anything. And that was the greatest psychological salary, that honor that we received as war fighters. We live in a society right now that is always looking for an opportunity to go ahead and show off what they're doing, what they're eating, the backflip that they can do. And what I expect from every young man and woman that comes into service is that you need to check that stuff to the side because it is no longer about you. It is all about a team of people, some which you may never meet in your life, but they will be involved in something that you're about to do in the future. Something magnificent, opportunities that you will never think that you will have. But a narcissistic approach to look at me, people in uniform doing TikToks about, this and that, and basically mocking the uniform, there's no place for you. And if we really want to talk about war fighting, we need to put down the phones and get to the field to start getting proficient on what we need to do. So that quiet professionalism, I think, is the cornerstone and the path and roadmap to success that we need for the future generation.
Well, SEAC, I don't really know that I can follow that up. Aaron, can you follow that up?
I absolutely cannot, Peaches. That's it. That's the one.
Okay, cool. Well, SEAC, I do want to pass it off to you one more time for any kind of closing comments you have, because like I've taken a lot away from this, and I appreciate your time. Not just me, Aaron and Trent and the folks that are listening. So I'm going to pass it over to you for opening comments on whatever topic you'd like to hit.
I would just like to take an opportunity to, number one, thank you both. It's been a pleasure being here with you today. And it's always good to be around the tribe. I love you guys with all my heart. You're my brothers, and I'm very proud of what each of you have accomplished in your careers, from young cones, to being now in the positions of responsibility that you have today. The other thing that I would like to say is that it's really been an honor to serve my nation for 33 years. As my chapter comes to an end on 3 November of 2023, I rest confidence that America's sons and daughters are going to rise up to the occasion to do what I have done for the past 3 decades, just like those Vietnam vets that I spoke about did for decades before me and every generation that came before them. But again, I would like to emphasize the generational commitment, the requirement for people, able young men and women, to coming into the ranks to be able to go ahead and carry the nation's duty of defense. And then the last thing that I would like to say is that behind every single one of us, there's a very courageous family that carries us, that has our support, that are there during our darkest times, and are there side by side when we actually get our days of glory. And those days of glory, I'm not talking about the award ceremonies or things of that nature. I'm talking about coming back home from combat or being able to stand side by side of the family that didn't get their loved ones to come back. Because glory indeed is the honor to be able to go ahead and be in combat and do what nobody else is willing to do. So with that, I would just like to tell you, gentlemen, thank you so much for this time. And it's really been an honor to serve with you both.
Well, thank you very much, SEAC. Congratulations on the 3 November retirement. We're happy for you. We wish you all the best. And we actually can't wait to see what you do on the outside, because I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. So for everybody out there listening, appreciate you joining us. Please like, subscribe. Don't forget to hit that notification bell, and we're out here. Thanks again.
Thank you, SEAC. Train hard.